The dragon diplomat named Sarinth returned home earlier than usual because a meeting at the council ended suddenly. The elders seemed nervous all day, and she felt something was wrong. Her wings were tired from flying, and she only wanted quiet rest. When she entered her great stone hall, she expected silence, but instead she heard soft laughter coming from the garden behind the house. She stopped walking and listened carefully because dragon laughter from children was rare and gentle. Human laughter inside a dragon home was almost impossible. She frowned slightly, wondering who dared to enter her private space without permission. Her steps were slow and controlled as she followed the sound. Her long tail brushed against the cold floor, and her claws clicked softly with each step. She reached the large doorway that opened toward the garden, and when she looked inside, she froze completely. The warm sunlight touched her eyes, and she saw something she never imagined. Her 3 young dragonlings were sitting in the grass with their wings folded neatly like students. And right in front of them was the human gardener Elias kneeling down with a small pot of soil between his hands. He was showing the dragonlings how to plant a tiny green seed. The dragonlings watched him with bright eyes full of focus, as if he was the most important teacher in the whole world. Sarinth could not move for several seconds. Dragons and humans did not mix casually. Humans usually stayed far away from dragon houses because they feared the size and strength of dragonkind. And dragons almost never trusted humans near their children. But her children sat comfortably with Elias, as if they had known him for years. Sarinth's heart tightened inside her chest. She did not understand what was happening. Elias looked gentle, but he was still a human. A creature smaller and weaker than any young dragonling. So how did he manage to keep her children calm and cooperative? How did he earn their trust without her permission? Her wings twitched with instinct, and old habits told her to roar and chase him away. But she held herself still because something in the scene felt peaceful rather than dangerous. Elias lifted the pot slowly and spoke in a soft voice, explaining how a seed grows only when treated with patience, kindness, and steady care. He called the seed tiny but powerful because it could become a huge plant one day. The dragonlings listened like they were hearing a secret. Sarinth felt confusion spreading through her mind. Dragons usually taught their young through strength, loud commands, and strict discipline. But this human used no shouting, no force, and no fear. He only used calm words and a warm smile, and somehow it worked better than any dragon training she had ever seen. Suddenly, Elias noticed a shadow falling across the grass and looked up. When he saw Sarinth standing at the doorway, his face became pale. The pot almost slipped from his hands. He quickly bowed his head down and remained frozen like a statue. The dragonlings turned their heads toward their mother, and their eyes widened a little, but they did not run away or hide. The air around them became heavy and silent, as if the whole garden was holding its breath. Sarinth's mind filled with questions. Why did her children trust this human so much? Did he do something she did not know? Did he protect them from something? Or did he teach them something she could not? She stepped closer to them slowly, and the grass bent under her claws. The dragonlings looked up at her without fear, and one of them placed a tiny paw gently on Elias's arm as if to protect him from her anger. This small gesture shocked Sarinth more than anything else she had seen that day. She tried to read her children's faces, but all she saw was honest affection. She tried to read Elias's face, but all she saw was fear mixed with respect. The situation felt fragile like thin glass. She understood that if she shouted or punished him, she might break something important in her children's hearts. She breathed deeply, and her warm breath passed over Elias like a silent warning, but she did not attack him. Instead, she asked quietly what he was doing and why he was with her children without calling her first. Her voice was calm but sharp like a blade hidden in soft cloth. Elias tried to speak, but his voice trembled. He said the children saw him planting flowers earlier and asked him many questions. They followed him and begged him to teach them about the seed. He did not refuse because they seemed lonely and curious. He only meant to help them understand simple garden work. He did not expect them to listen with such interest, nor did he expect the diplomat to return so early. He apologized again and again while keeping his head low. Sarenth listened carefully, and something inside her changed, like a door slowly opening. She did not fully trust him yet, but she could see he meant no harm. The dragonlings moved closer to her and told her how the human taught them gently and how they liked learning from him. Sarenth looked at their innocent faces and felt a strange warmth in her chest. It was the beginning of something she could not describe yet. Something that would change all of their futures. And for the first time she wondered if this human gardener was more important than she realized. That night the sky above the dragon city glowed with dark red clouds and slow-moving sparks from distant lava rivers. Sarenth stood on her high balcony, her wings half open and her thoughts heavy. She could not forget the image of her children sitting peacefully around Elias. She had seen humans before. She had negotiated with human armies, human kings, even human scholars, but she had never seen a human like him. A human who could make dragonlings sit still with gentle curiosity instead of wild fire. It troubled her and it fascinated her at the same time. She sent a messenger to bring Elias to her balcony. The human arrived quietly with slow steps. His head lowered as if he expected punishment. He stood a respectful distance away from her. The warm wind pushed his hair back and he felt the weight of the moment on his chest. Sarenth circled him slowly, her claws tapping on the stone. The balcony lights reflected off her red scales, making her look like a moving shadow of fire. Elias felt as if every heartbeat inside him sounded too loud. Sarenth finally asked him a simple question. But her voice carried power. She wanted to know why her children trusted him. Elias swallowed hard before he answered. He said he didn't know exactly. He only taught them gently and answered their questions honestly. He did nothing special. He spoke softly because they seemed scared at first. And he stayed patient when they made mistakes. He didn't want to frighten them. He only wanted to help them understand a seed's life. Sarenth narrowed her eyes and asked him why he taught kindness instead of discipline. She told him dragons use strength, order, and command to teach young ones. Elias shook his head and said a seed didn't grow with shouting. It grew with steady hands and gentle care. Maybe children were the same. His words confused her. No one in the dragon court ever thought like that. Dragons always believed power was the only teacher that mattered. She stepped closer. Close enough that Elias could feel the warm heat coming from her chest. She asked him what else he told them when she was not there. Elias answered truthfully. He said he told them to protect small things, to value life even when it looks weak, and to be patient with others. As he spoke, Sarenth felt something inside her shift again. These were not human tricks or manipulations. These were simple truths spoken from a calm heart. She did not know how to respond. A long silence stretched between them. The city lights far below flickered like stars on the ground. Elias kept his head down, but Sarenth studied him carefully. She sensed no deception, no hidden threat, only sincerity that dragons rarely saw in humans. She realized she could not understand him yet, not fully. She sensed there was something deeper about him. Something more than a simple gardener. She finally asked him one question she had not expected to ask. She wanted to know what he thought of her children. Elias hesitated but answered softly. He said they were curious, gentle inside even if they tried to appear strong, and smarter than they believed. He said their hearts were bright like young sunrise, and that they deserved someone who listened to them, not someone who only commanded them. Sarenth felt heat rise inside her chest at his words. Because no dragon had ever described her children with such softness, she pressed him again, wanting to know how he spoke with such confidence, how he understood young minds better than dragon tutors. Elias explained that he worked with plants his whole life. He saw how a seed reacted to the world around it. He learned how small mistakes could stop growth, and how gentle hands could save a dying sprout. He thought children were like gardens, each one needed different care. Different words, different warmth. Her wings shifted when she heard this. He spoke with more wisdom than some dragon scholars, but even as she felt a growing respect for him, Sarenth also felt fear whispering inside her mind. She knew the elders would not accept this. The Dragon Council already disliked humans, and they especially feared any human influencing royal heirs. She sensed a storm coming, something dangerous in the near future. She asked Elias if he understood what risk he took by teaching her children. Elias said he did not think about risk. He only thought about doing what felt right. His answer surprised her more than anything else. For a long moment she said nothing. She only looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. She realized he had no protector, no allies and no power, yet he stood before her with honesty. She wondered how someone so small could make her feel so unsure. Before she could speak again, she heard the sound of wings approaching the balcony. One of her dragonlings landed and clung to her arm with excitement. They told her they wanted Elias to teach them again tomorrow. Their voice was filled with pure joy. Elias stared in shock. Sarenth stared at her child. And in that instant she understood something important, something dangerous, something beautiful. Her children had chosen this human for a reason she didn't understand yet. And that reason would change everything in ways she could not foresee. The future had already begun shifting, and she was standing at the center of it with a human gardener who didn't even know how powerful his presence had become. Early the next morning, a cold wind moved through the dragon city. The sky looked strange with thin silver clouds stretched like long scars across the dawn. Sarenth felt uneasy even before she opened her eyes. Something was coming, something she could feel deep in her scales. Her instinct whispered danger, but she did not know its shape yet. She walked toward the garden with slow steps, hoping her children were still asleep. But the sound of excited voices told her they were already awake. When she reached the garden entrance, she stopped again. Just like yesterday, her 3 dragonlings were following Elias around the garden as if he were their chosen guide. 2 carried little baskets, and 1 walked close to his side, trying to match his steps. Elias was showing them how to check the soil's softness, how to feel the ground's warmth, and how to judge if a plant needed water or rest. Sarenth watched from the shadows. The human moved carefully but confidently. He talked to them with kindness and patience that even dragon tutors rarely used. But then the sky darkened suddenly and the air shifted like a warning. 3 huge shadows passed across the grass. The elders had arrived. They descended from the sky with their wings open wide and their bodies tense. They landed so hard that dust exploded around them. Elias stepped back in fear while the children moved closer to him. The elders' faces were sharp with anger, their eyes full of disbelief. They stared at the human as if he were a threat, even though he had nothing in his hands but a small spade. Elder Vorth, the oldest and strictest, pointed a claw at Elias and asked Sarenth what madness she had allowed in her home. He demanded to know why a human stood near royal dragonlings. He accused Elias of trying to influence them, to control them, to poison their minds with weak human ideas. Sarenth opened her mouth to speak, but her children reacted before she could. 1 dragonling stepped in front of Elias and spread their small wings to shield him from the elder's anger. Vorth's eyes widened in shock. Dragons never protected humans, especially not royal heirs. The 2nd elder, Hethra, hissed loudly, saying this was dangerous. She claimed dragonlings were young and easily misled. She said humans were not fit to teach anything to dragons, especially not the children of a diplomat. She warned that the council would consider this a violation of ancient rules. She accused Elias of pretending to be harmless so he could gain influence in the household. Elias shook his head quickly, saying he never meant anything wrong. But the elders ignored him completely, as if he were not even alive. The 3rd elder, Mirek, stepped closer and lowered his voice in a threatening way. He spoke to Sarenth directly and reminded her that dragons must not allow humans near their heirs. He said humans had always been servants, not teachers. He said allowing them to teach dragon children would weaken the future generation. He accused her of failing her duty. The words hit Sarenth like heavy stones, but she did not show fear. She stood tall and silent. Trying to understand why the elders were so afraid, Elias tried to bow and step back. But the dragonlings grabbed his clothes with their tiny claws and refused to let him move. The elders gasped again. It was a shocking sight. Dragon children choosing the human over their own authorities. This moment changed the atmosphere completely. The elders realized something deeper was happening. Something they did not expect. Something they could not control. And their fear grew darker. Sarenth finally spoke, her voice low but steady. She told them the human did nothing except teach the children how to plant a seed. She asked them why such a harmless lesson frightened the mighty elders of the council. The elders exchanged angry glances, but none answered immediately. Vorth said the danger was not the seed, but the influence. He warned her that her children were forming emotional bonds with a human, and that such bonds could reshape their beliefs forever. He said humans were unpredictable and weak. And weak creatures always created chaos when allowed too close. The children growled softly at the insult, but Sarenth noticed something else. Something hidden behind the elders' anger. She sensed fear, not strength, secrecy, not truth. They wanted Elias removed not because he was dangerous, but because he represented something they did not want the children to learn. She did not yet know what that truth was, but she felt its presence. Hiding like a shadow behind their words, Elias lowered his head and apologized for causing trouble. He said he would leave if Sarenth wished it, but her children clung to him tighter. One dragonling whispered to their mother that Elias made them feel safe. Another said he taught them things no dragon ever explained. Sarenth felt a strange ache in her chest hearing that. The elders stared at the scene with horror. As if they were watching the sky fall, Vorth finally stepped forward and gave a sharp order. He demanded that Elias be removed from the household immediately. He said if Sarenth failed to act, the council would step in and enforce their will. His voice thundered across the garden, and the tension rose like a storm. Sarenth looked at Elias, then at her children, then at the elders. And she realized this was not just a simple conflict. This was the beginning of a battle for truth, for the future of dragonkind. And perhaps for something even greater she had not yet seen. The wind grew colder around them. Silence held the air tightly, and deep inside Sarenth, a decision was forming. One that would change everything for dragons and humans alike. That night the garden felt different. The air was warm but strangely quiet. The moon hung low behind drifting smoke from distant lava vents. Elias could not sleep. His heart kept replaying the angry voices of the elders. He sat near the small storage shed trying to calm himself. He worried about Sarenth. He worried about the children. And he worried that everything would end because of him. He was just a gardener, nothing more. Yet somehow he had stepped into a world much bigger than he understood. Suddenly a soft tapping broke the silence. He turned and saw one of the dragonlings peeking from behind a stone pillar. Their small wings tucked close to their body, and their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They whispered for him to follow them. Elias hesitated at first because leaving the safe part of the garden at night felt risky. But the dragonling looked frightened and serious. So he stood up quietly and followed the dragonling led him across the garden to the farthest corner, a place Elias had never worked in before. The soil here was darker, warmer, and strangely untouched. The dragonling said they often felt something under this place, like a heartbeat trapped beneath the ground. Elias knelt down and pressed his hand against the soil. The warmth surprised him. It felt alive somehow, as if the earth was hiding something important. The dragonling encouraged him to dig. Elias used his small iron tool and began scraping away the top layer of soil. The ground felt softer than usual. Almost prepared for uncovering, soon he hit something hard. Not a rock, but stone shaped with purpose. He brushed the dirt away slowly and revealed old carved lines. His breath caught in his throat. This was no simple garden stone. This was something ancient. He kept cleaning until more of the carving appeared. The design showed two figures, one dragon and one human standing side by side. Equal in height, equal in strength. Elias froze in disbelief. This was impossible. He had been taught that humans were always servants to dragons. Nothing more. But this stone told a different story. A forgotten one. A secret buried for generations. The dragonling called softly for their mother. And within moments Sarinth arrived, her eyes sharp and glowing. She moved closer and stared at the carving without speaking. Elias saw her expression change from confusion to shock. Her claws trembled slightly as she touched the old stone lines. She whispered that this carving belonged to an ancient era, long before the council existed. Long before dragons declared humans weak. She realized quickly that this wasn't just a buried artifact. It was evidence, dangerous evidence, something the elders never wanted revealed. She felt anger rising in her chest, anger mixed with fear. If the elders discovered that she found this stone, they would act without hesitation. They would silence anyone who knew, including her children. Including Elias. Elias saw her distress and asked what the stone meant. She looked at him with a heavy expression and said dragons and humans once shared power. Once worked together as equals. She said the elders erased this history and replaced it with lies. She admitted she never believed humans were equal to dragons until the moment she saw Elias teaching her children. Now, looking at the carving, she realized the world she knew was built on a broken truth. Before she could say more, a shadow moved across the garden. Something large and silent landed on a high branch. Elias felt the weight of unseen eyes watching them. Sarinth turned quickly, her wings rising protectively over Elias and the dragonling. She heard soft claw scratches above her. Someone had been spying on them. Someone who should never see what they uncovered. She whispered for Elias to cover the stone. They grabbed soil quickly and pushed it back over the carving. But footsteps were already approaching, slow, deliberate, dangerous. Sarinth positioned herself between the sound and her child. She told Elias to stay behind her no matter what happened. He nodded with fear, tightening his throat. A tall figure stepped out of the shadows. It was one of the guards loyal to the elders. His armor reflected the moonlight in thin red lines. He sniffed the air as if sensing the truth buried beneath the soil. Sarinth forced her face into a calm expression and asked why he was in her garden at night. The guard said he received reports of suspicious activity and came to investigate. His eyes drifted toward the ground they had just covered. Sarinth spread her wings wider, blocking his view. Her voice sharp and commanding, she warned him that her home was not a place for council spying. The guard hesitated, but did not retreat. He knew something was wrong. Elias kept his head down, praying. The guard could not hear his racing heartbeat. The moment stretched dangerously. The night air felt tight and heavy. Finally the guard bowed stiffly and said he would report back to the elders. Then he walked away slowly, watching them with suspicion until he disappeared into the darkness. The garden fell silent again, but the threat remained hanging in the air. Sarinth turned to Elias and the dragonling. Her voice low and urgent, she said they must protect the truth they uncovered. Because if the elders learned about the carving, the consequences would be far worse than angry words. She said something bigger was happening, something old and powerful. And that this night was only the beginning of it. Elias looked at the ground, where the stone lay hidden, and felt a shiver of fear and responsibility. He was just a gardener, yet now he stood in the middle of a truth that could shake the entire dragon kingdom. Sarinth placed a protective wing around her child and looked at Elias as if choosing him for something he did not yet understand. Soil under their feet was warm like a heartbeat again. The night seemed to whisper secrets that had been buried for centuries. And Elias knew that once this truth came out, nothing in their world would ever be the same again. The sun had not yet risen when the first alarm bell echoed across the Dragon City. The deep sound rolled through the stone streets and climbed into the sky like a warning roar. Elias woke suddenly in the small room Sarinth had given him for the night. His heart was already pounding because he sensed something was wrong even before he opened his eyes. The air felt heavier, sharper. As if danger itself was breathing inside the house, he rushed outside and heard the heavy stomping of armored feet approaching. Not one pair but many, as if a troop of soldiers marched toward the garden. He ran toward the main hall hoping to warn Sarinth, but she was already awake, standing tall with her wings spread wide as if ready for battle. Her children hid behind her legs with frightened eyes. She looked at Elias, and he saw something he had never seen in her before. Fury mixed with fear. Before Elias could speak, the garden gate exploded inward. The powerful kick of a dragon guard shattered the wooden beams. 5 guards stepped inside with sharp metal blades strapped to their arms. Their armor gleamed in the dim morning light. They did not come for protection, they came for violence. Sarinth instantly stepped in front of Elias and her children. Fire glowing in her throat, the lead guard claimed they were sent by the council to secure the royal children. But Sarinth saw the truth instantly, their stance, the coldness in their eyes. The weapons drawn too early. They were not here to protect anyone. They were here to remove someone. And that someone was Elias. Her children cried out and ran to Elias, pushing themselves between him and the guards. The youngest dragonling wrapped their tail around his leg and refused to let go. The guards shouted at them to step aside, his voice low and threatening. He said the human must be taken immediately. He said Elias was a danger to their future bloodline. Elias backed up slowly with trembling hands, but the children clung tighter. Refusing to move, Sarinth roared. The ground shook beneath the force of her voice. She demanded to know who gave the order. The guards hesitated, but the truth slipped out in their nervous eyes. The elders had ordered the removal. They wanted Elias gone before he could spread the truth, or before the dragonlings bonded with him further. They saw him as a threat, not because he was dangerous, but because he gave the children something dragons had forgotten to give: gentleness, patience, and truth. One guard tried stepping forward again, but Sarinth slammed her tail across the ground, sending a shockwave that made dust rise into the air. She warned them that any harm to the children or Elias would be considered direct violence against her house. But even her authority could not stop the guards completely. They were desperate. Acting on the elders' fear, the second guard ignored her warning and lunged toward Elias. The dragonling in front screamed and spread their tiny wings to shield him. The guards stopped only because Sarinth leaped between them with a speed that made the wind howl. She pinned the guard to the ground with her claw, her eyes burning with fire. She hissed in his face, asking if he wished to risk his entire bloodline for the elders' lies. The guard trembled, but still tried to defend his orders. Elias, shaking with fear, tried to tell the children to go behind their mother. But they refused. They pressed closer to him, their small bodies trembling but brave. The sight struck Sarinth deeply. No dragonling had ever defended a human like this in dragon history. It was a moment impossible to forget. A moment powerful enough to break ancient beliefs. Another guard stepped forward, raising his arm blade, not at Elias but at the children. He wanted to scare them into moving. Sarinth's heart froze in horror. Elias did not think. His body moved before his mind understood. He stepped in front of the children and spread his arms wide, protecting them with his own body. The guards stared in shock, seeing a human risking his life for dragon young. An act no dragon warrior had ever expected. Sarinth's flames burst from her throat with a roar so loud the city walls shook. She struck the ground hard enough to crack the stone beneath her. She shouted that whoever touched Elias or her children would pay with their life. The guards froze, shaken by her fury. They realized they had crossed a line they were never meant to cross. They had endangered royal heirs in front of their mother. And no excuse could save them. Now the lead guard lowered his blade and stepped back. Fear breaking through his anger, he muttered that the elders warned them this might happen. He said the elders believed the human was changing the children's hearts in dangerous ways. He said dragons were never meant to mix with humans like this. Sarenth narrowed her eyes and growled that maybe the elders were afraid because the children were finally learning truth. Instead of tradition, Elias kept his arms around the dragonlings as shaky breaths escaped him. Sarenth looked at him with a new understanding. He did not fight with strength. He fought with courage born from kindness. Something dragons rarely respected but deeply needed. She realized at that moment that Elias was more than a gardener. More than a simple human, he was the spark that shook the council. The spark that revealed cracks in a kingdom built on lies. She ordered the guards to leave her grounds immediately or face her personally. The guards stepped back slowly, defeated. As they retreated through the shattered gate, they glanced at Elias with fear. Not because he was strong, but because he had already changed something powerful in the royal house. Something the elders could no longer control. When they were gone, the garden fell silent. The children hugged Elias tightly. Sarenth looked at them with a mixture of pride, confusion, and dread. She knew this attack was not the end. It was only the beginning. The elders would not stop. They would return stronger, angrier, more desperate to bury the truth. And now Elias was at the center of a storm larger than any of them had imagined. A storm that would decide not only their futures, but the future of dragons and humans alike. The council chamber sat deep inside the mountain, carved from black stone older than any living dragon. The walls glowed faintly with molten lines that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Elias had never seen anything so intimidating in his life. Sarenth walked beside him, her wings tight and her jaw clenched. Her children followed close behind, silent but brave. Today was not an ordinary meeting. Today truth itself would be dragged into the light whether the council wanted it or not. As they entered the chamber, dozens of dragons turned to stare at them. The echo of their claws on stone filled the room. Some dragons gasped when they saw Elias standing beside Sarenth. Others whispered angrily. A few looked frightened. The elders sat on the high platform with cold expressions, their wings folded like blades ready to strike. Elder Vorth leaned forward and let out a rumbling growl. He demanded to know why a human stood inside a sacred chamber. He said Sarenth had broken ancient protocol. Sarenth's voice was calm but sharp when she replied. She said protocol mattered less than the truth they were all hiding. The elder's eyes narrowed. They sensed she was about to expose something dangerous. Elder Hethra tried to interrupt her, but Sarenth raised a claw that made the chamber fall silent. She had never defied the elders in front of the entire council before. The moment felt heavy, electric. Everyone could sense a storm coming. Elias stood quietly, trying not to shake. His heart felt like it might burst from fear. But he stayed behind Sarenth because he knew leaving would put her and the children in greater danger. He had no power except his presence. But today, even that seemed to matter. Sarenth stepped forward and revealed the old stone carving Elias uncovered in the garden. The moment the carving touched the floor, the chamber fell completely silent. Dragons leaned forward, their eyes wide. The carving glowed softly with ancient energy. The figures of a dragon and a human standing as equals shone under the chamber's torches. Whispers spread around the room like fire across dry leaves. The elders stared at the carving with horror. Elder Vorth slammed his tail against the stone and shouted that the carving was forbidden. He said such relics were meant to stay buried. He accused Sarenth of treason for bringing it here, but Sarenth stared back coldly. She asked him why the carving was buried under her garden instead of preserved in the Hall of History. She asked why none of the council members ever spoke about an age where humans and dragons were equal. The elders had no answer. So they tried to redirect blame. Elder Mirek snarled that humans were unworthy, that they brought weakness wherever they went. He said dragons abandoned old alliances because humans betrayed them long ago. But Sarenth stepped closer to the platform and demanded he prove it. She told him to bring out the memory crystal, the one tool dragons used to reveal ancient truth. A tool that could not lie. Elder Mirak froze. The council members stared at him, waiting. The pressure grew heavy. Finally, Vorth ordered a servant to bring the memory crystal. A large glowing sphere filled with swirling light. As it activated, the chamber dimmed. The memory crystal showed visions of the ancient age. Dragons and humans building cities together, sharing knowledge, standing in battle side by side. The alliance was strong, unbroken, beautiful. But then something changed. The crystal flickered and showed a group of dragons whispering in secret, rewriting laws, erasing records, banishing humans from shared lands. The truth was clear. Dragons betrayed humans, not the other way around. The entire chamber gasped. A few dragons roared in disbelief. Others looked down in shame. Elias felt dizzy. He did not know his own people once stood beside dragons like equals. Sarenth watched the elders with fire in her eyes. She said this betrayal was why dragons feared humans. Not because humans were dangerous, but because the truth made dragons vulnerable. It exposed the lies that the elders protected for centuries. The elders panicked. Elder Hethra shouted that revealing such truths would cause chaos. She said dragon society would collapse. She warned that the children would grow up confused, torn between dragon law and human ideals. But the dragonlings stepped forward bravely, their voices small but powerful. They said Elias taught them kindness, patience, and care, things they never learned from dragon teachers. They said they trusted him with their hearts. The entire room shook at the boldness of their words. Many dragons softened at this. They murmured among themselves. They began questioning the elders' strict rules. Some dragons even nodded toward Elias with respect. The elders saw their grip slipping, their fear turning into desperation. Elder Vorth tried to silence the room by roaring. But his voice no longer had full control. Too many dragons had seen the truth. Too many had heard the dragonlings speak. Sarenth took a slow breath and declared she would not allow lies to shape her children's future. She said the world needed change, not more fear. She said humans were not the enemy. And she looked directly at Elias when she said it, her voice filled with conviction. The kind that shook stone walls. The elders tried one last time to regain control. Elder Mirak shouted that dragons and humans mixing would ruin their traditions forever. He pointed at Elias with open disgust, but before he could finish, a young dragon warrior from the back spoke loudly. He said maybe traditions deserve to be questioned if they were built on lies. Others nodded in agreement. Sarenth felt a shift in the air. The council was losing its power. The chamber erupted with loud arguments. Some dragons stood for truth. Others clung to the old beliefs. The elders yelled over them, trying to regain order, but the room no longer obeyed them. This was the moment Sarenth had feared and hoped for. The kingdom was cracking open. Truth was spilling into every corner. And nothing would return to the old way again. In the middle of the chaos, Elias stood quietly. The dragonlings beside him, the simple human gardener who had changed everything without meaning to. The elders lost their calm. Sarenth gained her strength. And the future of dragons and humans had already begun shifting toward a path no one could predict. But Elias was now part of that path, whether he wanted it or not. The council chamber shook with arguments long after Sarenth revealed the truth. Angry voices echoed off the stone walls. Some dragons demanded punishment, others demanded justice. Some wanted to protect Elias while others wanted him thrown out of the kingdom. The noise grew so loud that even the torches flickered as if afraid. Sarenth saw the chaos building and knew she could not allow the elders to twist the truth again. She spread her wings wide and released a roar that silenced the entire chamber. Every dragon froze, every claw stopped tapping. Every mouth shut. Sarinth ordered everyone to leave the mountain and gather in the great central plaza of the city. She said the truth did not belong inside a closed room. It belonged to all dragons, not just the council. The elders tried to protest, but the other dragons pushed them aside. Curiosity and unrest were stronger than tradition now. The kingdom moved like a river toward the plaza, flowing with tension and fear and hope all at once. Lias walked with the 3 dragonlings close beside him, their tails wrapped around his hands to keep him steady. He had never stood before so many dragons before. Hundreds filled the plaza, their wings layered like living roofs. Their eyes glowing with uncertainty. He felt small among them. Smaller than ever, yet he did not hide. Because hiding would mean abandoning Sarinth and the children, and he could not do that. Not after everything. When Sarinth landed in the center of the plaza, the ground shook. The dragons parted, giving her space. She looked powerful and calm. But her heart pounded with the weight of what she was about to do. She stepped forward and held the ancient carving high for the whole city to see. Whispers spread instantly. The glowing lines of the stone reflected across countless scales. Dragons recognized the symbols even before she explained them. She declared the truth clearly. Loudly, without hesitation, she told them that dragons and humans once worked as equals, built as equals, and ruled as equals. She said the carving was not a lie, but a memory buried by fear. She said the elders erased history, twisted teachings, and turned humans into servants so dragons could feel powerful. Her voice hit the crowd like a hammer of fire. The plaza erupted into shocked gasps. Before anyone could argue, the dragonlings stepped forward, their small voices rising in the open air. They said Elias taught them kindness, patience, and courage without ever using fear. They said he listened to them better than any dragon tutor. They said he made them feel safe and strong in a way they did not understand before. Their innocence pierced through the tense air like sunlight breaking clouds. Dragons listened differently now, their hearts softer, their minds uncertain. Elias stood behind them with shaking hands. He never thought his simple acts would lead to this. He never wanted power or attention. But here he was standing at the center of a kingdom's awakening. He looked at Sarinth, and she gave him a small nod, one filled with trust. And that alone gave him enough courage to remain standing. The elders finally forced their way through the crowd, their faces burning with anger and fear. They shouted that Sarinth was destroying dragon pride. They accused the human of manipulating the royal heirs. They warned that dragons would lose their greatness if they accepted the truth. But the crowd did not roar with agreement, as the elders expected. Instead, many dragons hesitated, their eyes drifting between the carving Sarinth, Elias, and the children. The tension thickened like storm clouds ready to break. And then a young dragon warrior stepped forward. He shouted that pride built on lies was hollow. He said the carving proved dragons once relied on humans for wisdom as much as strength. He asked the elders why such a rich history had been stolen from them. Another dragon added her voice, saying she had seen more bravery in the human gardener yesterday than in some dragons today. Murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. The elders tried shouting again, but their voices no longer controlled the plaza. The weight of truth was too strong. The people were no longer blind. They demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded change. Vorth attempted to claim the carving was fake, but Sarinth challenged him publicly. She called for the memory crystal once more, and this time the crowd supported her. Chants rose for truth, for history, for justice. The elders grew desperate. They tried to leave, but the crowd blocked their path. Not with violence, but with unity. Dragons stood wing to wing, demanding transparency, demanding the council face their past. The elders' power cracked like old stone under a hammer. They could no longer hide behind fear. The kingdom had woken up and would not fall asleep again. In the center of the chaos, Sarinth turned to Elias, her voice quiet but strong. She thanked him for showing her children a different path, a path dragons had forgotten. Elias shook his head. saying he was only a gardener and never meant to change anything. But Saranth smiled gently. She told him sometimes the smallest seed could change an entire forest if planted in the right place. Her words traveled through the plaza like wind carrying sparks. Dragons whispered them to one another. The idea grew, spread, took root in their hearts. The plaza began calming not with fear, but with a strange sense of hope. A soft warm light seemed to settle over them. Even the air felt lighter than before. Slowly, Saranth walked forward and placed the tiny seed Elias used to teach the children in the very center of the plaza. She pressed it into the warm soil with her claw. Then she stepped aside and let Elias pour water over it. Dragons watched this simple act in awe. A human and a dragon planting a seed together for all to witness. Symbolizing the beginning of a new chapter, the dragonlings hugged Elias tightly. Their small wings brushing his arms, the crowd softened with the sight. Some dragons bowed their heads with acceptance. Others remained uncertain, but all understood one thing. History had changed today. A wall between species had cracked open, and light poured through. Saranth looked at Elias with a steady gaze. She knew the Elder's power would never fully return. She knew the kingdom would rebuild itself on truth, not fear. And she knew the moment she first saw him in the garden was indeed the moment that changed their futures. Elias looked around. Overwhelmed, exhausted but alive. He never imagined a gardener could reshape a kingdom. Yet here he stood, surrounded by dragons and new beginnings. And as the seed absorbed its first drop of water, a warm wind brushed through the plaza, as if the world itself whispered that change had finally come.